You want to go after a keyword that's a little bit more niche. It's there might not be as many people looking for it, but it's hyper relevant and it's easy to rank for. And so you can be the big fish in the little pond and own whatever traffic there is going to those keywords. For most small businesses, that's the direction that you want to go.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that has built several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the CEO and founder of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And today we have another great guest on our expert episode, which is Joshua Tobler. And Josh will talk a little bit about SEO with us and kind of how, and for those of you that don't, SEO is basically how you make your website more searchable or more found on Google, how you get to that first page, how you get the rankings, and whether it's on Google. I guess Bing is still a thing, or DuckDuckGo, but really on Google. But Josh will talk a little bit more about that. And so with that, welcome onto the podcast, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
So before we dive into just the exciting world of SEO, maybe give us just a couple-minute background as to where you're at, where you came from, and why you know all the things about SEO that you do.
Sure. Business has been on my mind for a long time. I remember it must have been 6th grade or something. We were reading a book. I think it was called The Toothpaste Millionaire. I don't even know if we read the whole thing, but it's about a kid about the age that I was at the time who figures out a way to make a better toothpaste, and he just did it for himself, but it ends up turning into this business opportunity. And I was just fascinated by this concept, the idea that I could do a thing and make my own money and not always have to be constantly, if I wanted the Power Ranger toy, I could get the Power Ranger toy and not necessarily be subject to my parents' purse strings. So this idea was just in the back of my mind like a mind virus my whole life. So I went to college at Utah Valley University, and it was kind of a no-brainer to go into business. I didn't know specifically what subcategory of business to study, so I did what anybody does, and I majored in business management, which is about as close to managing an undecided as you can possibly do. But I did have sort of in the back of my mind the idea that, okay, I understand the different components of business, but marketing specifically, this is the one piece that I feel like I'm personally missing. If I can figure out how to leave the cave and kill something, drag it home, then if I can go out and get new business, the rest of it I think I can figure out. And so I leaned really hard into marketing, and that ended up becoming an opportunity to work in the SEO field. My first job out of college, I worked at a company who does link building, which is one component of SEO. And so, it's a particularly challenging component. I won't go into the nitty gritty of it, but it's the most difficult piece of SEO. But that's where I cut my teeth. And then some people inside the company decided that they kind of wanted me working in the full service product line. So it's the link building piece, and then all of the other levers that you have to pull to be successful in a Google search. And so I learned how to do kind of the whole suite of things that you need to do. And then the company shrank on that product line, and I was laid off. And so I'm like, oh, great. So I go, and it's back to the drawing board, and I've got to go find a new job. Well, I get a phone call. Oh, I don't know, after I got laid off, from one of my former clients, someone I was doing SEO work for, and said, they don't really have anybody over there doing that anymore, as far as I can tell. And I still need SEO. Do you want to be my SEO guy?
Sure, I'm laid off. I will take the job. Absolutely. At least that's how I would do it.
That's what it was. And so I filed an LLC and started up and uh, set up some relationships with some vendors and I that was now. So this is brand new.
So now, no, I think that's a great introduction. Kind of gives us where you came from. So now let's dive into is given this is an expert episode, we'll dive into a bit on the SEO and kind of what things people should know. So my exposure to SEO is kind of one of those where you're enough to be dangerous, but not enough to really do anything, and that's kind of about my extent. But if I understand SEO, which is stands for search engine optimization, it's basically how do you make your page rank on higher up on Google, or how do you move it up so that you're the first page of Google, or you're the number one ranking, or how do you get organically or without having to pay for advertising, how do you get ranked higher on Google? Is that about right? Is that what SEO would be?
That's exactly what SEO is. Yep.
So now let's say, taking somebody that's just new, they're a startup, they're a small business, and they go to whether it's, their Squarespace or ClickFunnels or Shopify or WordPress, and they build their page. They go in there and, they have the little tutorial, they build their website and they're excited about it, whether it's an awesome, great website or it's a terrible website. Everybody thinks their website is awesome. Although just as a complete aside, my pastime is I always think most 95% of legal websites are just horrible. They may look pretty, don't get me wrong, but they're horrible on everything else. Now that's my aside. So I always like to go and just make fun of other legal websites because I dislike them. But so now we do that. So we take that individual, they built their first website and they're saying, hey, I've got either a new product or I want to do e-commerce, or I saw an ad on Facebook and says, if I go and start a Shopify or store, I'm going to be a millionaire. Whatever the case is, where do you even start with SEO? Or where's a place, especially if you don't have the ability to hire someone as an SEO, you don't have an SEO expert, or you don't have that budget right now, where should you start?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of foundational principles that you need to understand just strategically. And so this person in question, this hypothetical, is already ahead of the competition. At least they know they need a website. Some business owners aren't even there. Right. And that's what they always told you, right? Location, location, location. This is why search engine optimization is important, because anymore, it's not about where your business, where your building is located. That might help too, but it's about, can you get your brand in front of people where they are? And that is going to need to incorporate search engine optimization. If you're not in Google, you don't exist. Right?
Or at least you don't exist online, right? You still probably are a good human being that exists, but as far as everybody online is concerned, you don't exist, right?
As far as getting in front of the people who you want to buy from you, yeah, for all functional purposes, you don't exist.
Right. So now I'm going to go back to my original question, which I still say. So now they've realized, hey, I need to have a online presence. That's where the customers are finding, searching. They're looking for reviews. They're looking for whatever. I'll ask my same question. So where do you start? You have a basic website going, but you're saying, I don't know what to do beyond there. What would you say is a beginner place to start if you have to start somewhere?
Well, so Google wants to serve up results. And like you say, Google's not the only game in town, but they're still by far the biggest. They want to serve up results that are relevant, that are authoritative, and that provide a good user experience. So the very general answer is you have to be relevant, you have to be authoritative, and you have to provide a good user experience on your website. What does that actually mean? It means a lot of things. First thing it means is content. Google wants to serve up content. What does content mean? It means you are giving people information that is going to help them solve problems. If you're a business owner, you're an expert in something, right? If you expect someone to be able to, if someone is willing to give you money for what you know, then you know something that's worth something.
Or at least they think you know something that's worth something.
Or, well, yeah.
It's kind of the old adage, it's better to look good than to be good. At least you got to look good.
Yeah, it's true. But I think more business owners are actually good more than they think they are. So that's, you can't rank without content. So you've got to start creating content or hiring someone to do it for you.
So I'm going to bring up number one step. You're saying, if nothing else, start to create content. Is that kind of a good place if they have to start somewhere to start?
It's a necessary but insufficient condition to rank in Google.
Okay, so I'll take that as a yes. The number one thing is we need to get, not the only thing we need, but we do need content. So let's say I start writing the world's best blog posts, or I have a podcast or something that creates content. And I assume that at least for SEO, you're probably better to do a blog post because it has actual words that Google can search. Podcast is going to be harder because it doesn't sit there and see what we talk about on that. So let's say I write the world's best blog post, or I do a lot of content of how-tos or lists or other things on my website. So check, I've got my content. Then you're going to say that it's insufficient. So what's the other next thing I should do?
Well, and I think we've actually gotten ahead of ourselves already, because before you even start the content, you need to know what keywords you're trying to optimize for, right? What are people looking for that is relevant to you? And that's keyword research, and that is a pain in the butt. But you can go to, if you have no budget at all, you can go to Google Keywords Planner. It'll get the job done. I use a little bit more professional tools that make it a little bit easier, but a lot of elbow grease, because you want to find like every conceivable variation of every product and service that you offer, and every question that people have about it. And that will guide your content strategy and everything else you do through the course of an SEO campaign.
Let me ask you a question on that. So, because my exposure, again, I started out saying I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be an expert, is, let's say you have the keywords. So let's take my law firm as an example, because that's an easy one for me to talk about, is, I want to be the patent and trademarks for startups, right? And so I go and I do my keyword research, and I look up startups, I look up small businesses, I look up patents, and I look up trademarks, just as a few examples. Now, when I write my articles or I write my content, should I be gearing or writing the content so that it's based on those keywords? Because where I get into is what sometimes it seems like when you read some content is it becomes unnatural, right? Now you're trying to write to get the words in there as opposed to write so normal people can read it and understand it. So how do you make that balance? So I know which keywords I want, I've done the hard work as you identified, but now how do I write it so that a machine likes it, Google likes it, but normal people can also read it?
Well, and this is a great question, and this is a question that not enough people in the SEO world are asking, right? Because too many people are writing for the machine. And here's the problem. The machine is changing. I mean, I can't remember Google's market cap off the top of my head, but it's an enormous freaking company. They've got some money, and they have the best technical talent in the world, constantly trying to better measure and evaluate how well your website works for people. So it's not there yet, right? The machine is not a human equivalent artificial intelligence, but it's getting that direction all the time. So rather than take a snapshot of how the Google algorithm works right now and then optimize for that, again, Google wants to serve up relevant, authoritative content that provides a good user experience. So write for the humans.
All right. So the short answer is get your topics from and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. So certainly if I'm saying it wrong, but if I were to understand it, write or get your keyword topics or figure out what the keywords are that you do want to rank on, but then write articles based on that is for humans or that's understandable for your audience. Don't just write it for Google. Is that a fair summary?
100%. Yeah. Let the keywords be your guide, but don't optimize for machines. And machines aren't the ones who you want to discover your content and then buy your product.
Okay. No, it makes perfect sense. So now let's say, okay, walking through, first thing we said, I got my website. Now I need to start getting content. And content can mean, if I understand it, can mean a few things. Content may be what you put on your landing page. It doesn't always have to be a long blog article, but it may be, hey, your landing page or your main website page, you want to have good content there. Then you can always build on top blogs, right?
That's correct. And let's go into a little bit more detail on that. What you want to think about is you want to think about content clusters. So maybe, so let's say you're an IP lawyer. And so one of your product groups, your profit centers is going to be trademarks. Okay, so maybe you've got a trademark landing page.
Hmm.
And yes, content on that page, very, very important. And you want that keyword optimized and you want that to provide a good user experience. You're also presumably writing blog content on the same topic. You want to
Hmm.
make sure that that blog content is internally link from your blog post, that money page that you ultimately want to direct traffic towards.
Hmm.
And you're going to do, so you've got a trademark content cluster, maybe you've got a copyright content cluster, right?
Hmm.
And structuring your site, tell Google a couple of things. It's going to say, hey, this page is really, really important for these keywords, right? Of all the pages on my website, here's the trademark keyword page.
Hmm.
And the other thing it's going to say is, well, and then all of that link equity that's being generated from the blog post is going to filter down into that page. So that's sort of a strategic way to think about how to structure your content.
Okay, so and I'm breaking it down onto my level, and maybe that's always a dangerous thing. So it sounds like, hey, let's say we take the main landing page and we say, here's kind of our content clusters as you talked about, and that would be, going back to the law firm example, but it'd be applicable everywhere. Is, hey, I may want to have a portion on my landing page that talks about trademarks. I may want to have it talk about patents. I may want to talk about why startups need it. And then from there, I link it almost to additional or a blog page or an additional page within the website that then starts to embellish or talk more about that drills down into that and gets it deeper. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. In your case, I'm well, and maybe let's use a different example to
Hmm.
make principle crystallize a little bit. Let's say you own an HVAC company. Maybe it's HVAC and plumbing.
Hmm.
So you want one dedicated page on your site for HVAC. In fact, maybe you want one just for air conditioning and another one just for heating and another one just for plumbing. Or
Hmm.
maybe it's even just for kitchen plumbing, right? These decisions you'll understand better once you've done your keyword research and how to divvy these up. But the point is, you want one page that you are trying to promote for a cluster of closely related keywords.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask additional kind of follow-up question, or maybe slightly pivoting. But now you take that, because I know, again, that there's long tail and there's short tail, right? You can have very short, and if I understand it, short tail is basically short words. Maybe it's patent attorney, and a long tail would be more like, what is a patent or a trademark? And so it's kind of how people search, if it's a small snippet or a couple words versus a longer, almost question or sentence or something that has more description to it. And is it better to go for the short words, and when you're writing all your content, or do I want to make it heavy on, hey, patent attorney type of a thing, or do I want to drill down, or do I want to do both? Or how do you start to balance shorter descriptions or shorter topics versus longer ones? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense, and that is a great question. But I do want to challenge the premise just a little bit. So you're right. There's long tail keywords and there's short tail keywords, but don't think about those in terms of the length of the search term itself.
Okay.
It's a better way to conceptualize that is your short tail keywords have an enormous amount of search volume. There's a lot of people searching for exactly that phrase,
Hmm.
but therefore it's really, really difficult to get on the first page of Google. If you're not on the first page of Google, nobody goes to the second page. When was the last time you navigated to the second page of Google? It's all about getting the first page ranking.
It's usually, if I go to the second page, it's because the first page is too many ads, right? It only has like 3 results. But most of the time, you're right. Most people always look at the first page.
Yeah, almost always you want to be in, if you're not getting in the top 10 placements, then you're not really getting any traffic out of Google.
Hmm.
Um, what was my point? Why did we get onto
Long
that?
tail versus short tail.
Short term. Um, so if those first page results are just gargantuan sites that you're not going to be able to outrank in any reasonable amount of time or with a reasonable amount of investment,
Hmm.
strategically, that's not the keyword you want to go after. You
Hmm.
want to go after a a keyword that's a little bit more niche.
Mm,
It's there might not be as many people looking for it, but it's hyper relevant and it's easy to rank for. And so
mm,
you can be the big fish in the little pond and own whatever traffic there is going to those keywords.
mm.
For most small businesses, that's the direction that you want to go.
So it sounds like, unless you're in a marketplace where not very many people, are competitive, if there's not a lot of people and you took HVAC, let's say you, and I'm sure it's not the case anymore, but you are the first company to go online to do HVAC, then maybe you could go for the short tail because it's, or, only a few, you could probably go for those shorter words because it's less competitive. On the other hand, if you wanted to go for smartphones and there's smartphone cases, smartphones, smartphone accessories, everybody's trying to sell smartphone accessories, you're going to have a much more competitive. Then it almost sounds like, hey, maybe we niche down and we get several different long tail ones that not as many talk about. And I'm just making up, but let's say, hey, I want to go into smartphone cases, and I'm going to say which cases or fits the best for the Samsung Galaxy S10, and as an example. And then you're niching down to not just all smartphones or all smartphone cases, but now let's talk about a specific one. And while you're not going to get as much volume on as if you could rank number one on smartphones, you're going to get, when people are looking for that, you can get a better ranking. My mind, it always seems like you're kind of aggregating it together. Maybe you have 10 or long tails that each individual isn't going to drive as much traffic as a short tail, but overall you're going to start building it and layering, get more traffic that way. Is that a good way to think about it?
That's exactly right. And during the keyword research process, you'll have identified both, right? You
Mm,
kind of need the short tail keywords in order to identify the long tail keywords. That's how you find them.
mm,
And so it may be in the back of your mind, ultimately, I want to own the entire smartphone industry in search.
mm.
And so maybe that's your long-term goal. But in the meantime, you want to be getting some positive ROI on your SEO investment. So the quickest route there is to get those long tail keywords first.
No, that makes perfect sense. So now let's, so we do that. So one, we identify your keywords, short tail, long tail. We start to write content, and we, let's say we have the world's best content, perfectly organized for long tail, short tail. We start to rank. What's another thing, or what is or what are the other things that we should be considering?
Well, so far, everything that we've talked about really only addresses that first question, right?
Mm,
Remember, relevant, authoritative, positive user experience. We've talked about relevant.
mm.
Um, what about authoritative? Anyone who's old enough to remember Ask Jeeves, or then it became Ask.com, or Yahoo search, or
I
any
remember Ask Jeeves. Ask Jeeves was awesome. Now
Ask
I
Jeeves
don't have
was
no idea what happened to it, but it was awesome at the time.
Well, Ask Jeeves was awesome until it wasn't.
Yeah.
It became pretty obvious at a certain point that if you search something in there, everything that was coming up was a bunch of junk that you didn't care about, and you were
Mm,
3, 4, 5, 6 pages deep to try and find what you were looking at. So we all moved to Yahoo, and then before long, Yahoo was the same thing.
mm,
Google was and the reason why Google owns search today is
mm,
because the first search engine that came along that gave you what you wanted just about every time. I mean,
mm,
I was young, but I remember it was a miracle. It changed the way I interacted with the internet forever, and the way everybody else interacted with the internet forever.
mm,
The difference was they figured out a way to measure authority that nobody else had. And
mm,
so what they did is they downloaded the internet. That's really not an exaggeration. They made a massive index of every page that they could find on the entire internet, and they counted the number of of hyperlinks that linked from one place to another. And those are backlinks. And the pages that had the most backlinks rose to the top, because
mm.
basically those backlinks were considered third-party endorsements. It was like a vote for your content.
And if I remember that used to be, and that's what if I, just from my short study, backlinks used to be the way, but then everybody started to cheat the system, right? They started to make a whole bunch of websites that they would create that pointed to their website, and everybody just would, you'd almost have the underground, or the black hat type of a thing where people are all just creating websites and it's just kind of trolls and they all link to stuff. They really don't mean anything other than you had a whole bunch of backlinks. And so then Google changed, right?
Correct. Yeah. It was harder to gain backlinks, but people figured out ways to do it. And thus began the SEO arms race
Mm,
of Google figuring out new ways to identify and punish manipulative links.
mm,
Because really they only want to count links that are truly third-party validation of your content.
mm.
Uh, and so if it doesn't meet their guidelines, they wanted to at least ignore the link, if not outright punish it.
Mm.
And that has been the SEO Google arms race ever since.
So if I were to do that and give you an example, so you go on places like Fiverr or other things that advertise, hey, we can do SEO for $10 or $100 or whatever, and they'll say we'll get you a whole bunch of backlinks. Those are probably not good for you, or they're harmful in the sense that they're just going to suboptimal sites or ones that are going to pull down your ranking. And so if I were to put words in your mouth, don't go for the sites that are going to be the crappy sites or people that promise a whole bunch of backlinks that are going to be terrible backlinks because they don't buy you anything on SEO. Is that right?
That's right. There's a lot of controversy over what Google considers a toxic backlink and what it doesn't,
Mm,
and they're very opaque about the topic. But but a good rule of thumb is the easier a link is to get, the less it counts. Luckily, Google is a lot less um, punitive
mm,
with those tactics. They've kind of moved in the direction of, all right, if there's something we see that we don't like, we're just going to ignore it. We're not necessarily going to punish you, but manual actions are still happening, so you do have to be careful.
mm,
Um, but an even better rule of thumb is to say, all right, like what is the kind of link that Google really does want to count? Well, it's third party validation. It's a link that actually speaks to the authority of your content,
mm,
which means it's going to be on an independently owned site. There can't be any signal that you own this other site that's also linking to you, right? That's not what they want.
mm,
Um, or it needs to be editorially placed, meaning it's not like on a Right for Us site where you just like published a blog or something. Like there needs to be a human being who has evaluated the content and said, yeah, this is good, post,
mm.
right?
Oh,
And
so
and it
then
needs,
it's
and it
oh, go
needs to be
ahead.
relatively relevant.
So relevancy. So now that you're saying that second branch. It sounds like, hey, you're going to want to have other authority, real sites. If I were to say, hey, the people that you can't. Again, we're going to the people that don't have somebody that manages for them, or they don't have the budget to just simply turn it over to someone to do this. But they're saying, hey, if I want to go to if I want to get it, let's say as an example, I'm in the legal industry, then I may want to go to other sites, whether it's entrepreneur.com or startups or something that Reader's Digest or something that has authority that actually is relevant to my audience, get real people that are actually running the website that aren't just mine that I'm feeding back to it, and or start to see how I can get them to direct traffic or link to my site. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's right. And as far as actual techniques for generating these links,
Hmm.
it's incredibly difficult because by definition, you don't own the other places on the internet that you want linking into your website.
Hmm.
But there are techniques to do it and to do it legitimately. And I utilize as many of them as I possibly can.
Hmm.
When I'm doing SEO for a client, and they have varied levels of success. But ultimately, the the way to earn legitimate links yourself is going back to that content piece.
Hmm.
If you have the best, most authoritative research on a topic,
Hmm.
well, I mean, people are going to link to that. Now,
Hmm.
that's really really difficult if you're that local HVAC guy that serves 3 cities out in Wyoming.
Hmm.
Um, it's hard to be that guy, right? Dave Ramsey doesn't need SEO. He produces so much stinking content. People find him and link to him very naturally.
But
It's
so
very
let's
very difficult
So now,
without
now, no, Dave Ramsey's awesome, but let's say I take the example that you almost did. The guy out in Wyoming that has a great HVAC, he's putting out great content. It seems to me, and correct me where I'm wrong, some of the tactics may be, hey, if I write great content, then you start to go out to because you also have the opposite side of a lot of websites that are big websites, they stay relevant because they're actively posting new content. So they are looking for content, they're looking for new articles or things to share with their audiences. And so it may be worthwhile if you are writing great HVAC content as an example example, to start reaching out to those websites. And you can do that through Haro, which is help a reporter out, or reach out to them directly, or do something of that nature to where you can start to say, hey, I've got this great content, would you share it? Or, or you can pay people if, you can always do advertising or paid, sponsoring content for them to put it on their website or promote it, but start reaching out to those that are relevant in order to then get them to start posting it and then linking back to your site as a source. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's one good way to do it. Another way to do it is to find anytime your company gets mentioned out
Mm,
on the internet and they haven't linked to you, you can reach out to the webmaster, say, hey, you've got this information, can you like.
mm,
Another way that I really like that's sneaky but still very much on the legitimate white hat side of the line is if you know who your competitors are and you can pull their backlink profile and you
mm,
can see which of their pages are attracting the most links, you can
mm,
look at their page and say, well, shoot, I've got better content than this, or maybe I don't, but I could make it. And you make a better version of that same content. And then you can reach out to those other sites who are linking into your competitor and say, hey, you're pointing to this page, and maybe the page is broken, maybe it's a broken link, or maybe it's just not, it's inferior content, but I've got this superior content. How about handing me a link instead?
mm.
I call that competitor sniping. I love doing that.
Hey, any way you can get a legitimate or leg up, I think is always worthwhile. So now let's take the last pillar and remind me. So you got one is first one was content, or remind me how you phrased it. What were the first pillar?
Well, relevance, authority, and user experience.
So we've got relevance, check. Let's say I've got a whole bunch of great content. Authority, I've got a whole bunch of backlinks, and everybody is citing to me as being an authority. And then user experience, we're starting to run out of time on the podcast, but I don't want to leave people hanging. So maybe give us just a quick insight as to user experience.
This is going to become increasingly important. Google has just announced that they're using some more user experience signals in their search engine next summer. So this is something that's worth paying attention to.
Mm,
Um, Long story short, your pages need to load fast. They, especially mobile users, have you ever loaded something on your phone and like the page jumps around and there's a pop-up that takes up the whole screen? Like,
mm.
don't don't do any of that. Make sure your ads are streamlined if you've got ads. Like, everything has to just load fast and give the user what they want without annoying them.
Mm. So if I were to maybe take that and summarize it, one is making sure you have fast load times, and that can be making sure your pictures aren't so huge that it takes 10 seconds to load and everybody's going to move on. I think you want to have, pretty quick load times on pictures. Make it so that the flow of your website, you don't have pop-ups all over, or, makes it so unusable, and really just make it so they get there, it loads quickly, and it has a good flow to it and makes sense for people as they're trying to get the information. Is that about right?
Correct, and you need to make sure that you've got an SSL certificate. You're on HTTPS, not HTTP.
Mm,
You need to make sure that your website is mobile friendly. There's a lot of constituents that go into it, but you can Google Core Web Vitals, and it'll give you a full list of things that are going to be tracked. And a lot of these things already are tracked, but long and the short is, just make sure that when a human being lands on your site, they get what they came to get with as few interruptions and annoying uh, 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 delays as possible.
all right. No, makes perfect sense. So as we, and again, I think it's an interesting topic, although I just think it's fun to build websites, to try and rank, to do all those. So even though I do intellectual property, I just find that as a personal interest to be fun. Um, but as we're wrapping up, if people want to get more information, they want to hire you, they want to pick your brain, they want to be, have you as a consultant, they want to find out more information, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to connect up with you, find out more, hire you, anything or any of that nature?
Sure, go to longtaildragon.com. It's all one word, and I'll give you a free website audit. I'll find anything that's broken under the hood that can be fixed. I'll audit your backlinks. Make sure there's nothing toxic in there that you need to get rid of. But I'll free of charge. I'll do all of that for free.
No, I think, and I appreciate that offer, and I certainly invite people to take you up on it. Now, one question, I know that was, I said was my last question, but one more question, which is, people, if people are saying we have a bit of a budget, what kind of budget should they expect? Should they expect, $1,000 a month, $100 a month? Should they expect, a whole bunch of or service? What kind of, if they're trying to gauge as to what they should be anticipating or budgeting if they are starting to want to hire someone else to do their SEO or strategy for them?
Depends on how competitive your keywords are. If you're a local business, it takes less investment to rank locally than it does to rank globally for, if you want to own an entire topic somewhere. But most agencies generally won't take accounts that are less than about $2,000 a month, which obviously that's a big budget for a lot of small businesses. I've tried to structure my packages to the point that they're affordable to small and medium businesses because I like them better. I like small business. That's what I'm about.
Hey, I'm right there with you. So, well, awesome. Well, I certainly invite everybody to go out to longtaildragon.com, check you out, see your services, utilize you, because I think that SEO is certainly something that can be very impactful to your business. Sometimes it takes a few months or it takes a little bit longer, it's a longer investment versus just go pay for the Facebook ads or the Google ads. But the nice thing is, it's not like Google ads that the day you turn off the ads, you go away and all that money, it's an investment that continues to reap dividends and is a much longer term return on it. So thank you for coming on the podcast, Josh. Now, if you are a listener and you have either an expertise that you want to share or you just want to come on and share your journey, feel free to go to inventivejourneyguest.com. We'd love to have you on and hear your journey or hear your expertise. If you are a listener, make sure to click subscribe as you're listening to this podcast so you get notifications all our new episodes come out. And last but not least, if you ever need help with patents and trademarks, feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law. We are always here to help. Thank you again, Josh. Appreciate you sharing some of your knowledge and look forward to seeing how many people you can help rank highly on Google.
Thanks, Devin. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode of The Inventive Journey, make sure to go and check out Startups Magazine. They're an awesome magazine and podcast centered over in the UK. And if the magazine is a digital and print magazine where they focus on tech startups and entrepreneurs, and they also have a focus on female founders and women in tech. So if you want to check out their magazine, either digital or print, it's Startups Magazine, startups with an S, magazine.co.uk. And you can also look up their podcast, which is called The Serial Entrepreneur. So go check them out. They're awesome. And definitely, if you like this episode, you'll like them.